And we are live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 2014 Chemistry Nobel Prize Predictions Google Hangout. My name's Carmen Drahl, and I am a reporter with Chemical and Engineering News. We have a great panel ready for you today. This is the first in a series of 3 hangouts about the science Nobels. I want to welcome all the folks in the audience who came here through Science News or Smithsonian Magazine. Please, you should tune in to their hangouts on Thursday, October 2nd. More info is at our Google Plus event page and at these hashtags, BizNobel and MedNobel. Our audience today is a mix of chemists and non-chemists, so by way of a little bit of background, the Nobel Prizes are arguably the most famous awards in all of science. They're given out once a year. For chemists, this is like Oscar night, March Madness, and the Super Bowl all rolled into one. Everyone gets very excited about predicting winners. When the announcement comes, it's a day in the spotlight. And now the molecules Nobel laureates have studied might be 1 or a couple of atoms big, like the ozone in our atmosphere, or many thousands of atoms, like the proteins that keep us alive. I'm going to introduce our guests today. We have Stuart Cantrill, Chief Editor. Neil Withers, Features Editor for Chemistry World magazine. And David Pendlebury. David is a citation analyst at Thomson Reuters. My co-hosts today are Lauren Wolf, who is the Deputy Assistant Managing Editor for the Science Group at Chemical and Engineering News. Lila Guterman, the Deputy Managing Editor for News at Science News. Lila is not on our video feed today, but Lila is helping us with the avalanche of tweets that you folks are sending in. I hope that you will participate in the Hangout by sending your questions using the hashtag chemnobel. So with that, I'm going to ask the first question, which is, who do you pick to win the 2014 Chemistry Nobel Prize? And I'll start with David Pendlebury.
Well, thank you, Carmen. Thanks for the invitation. I can tell you who Thomson Reuters has selected this year as our citation laureate. It's a little hard. In fact, I think it's probably impossible to tell given year, but we are trying to find people that, according to our quantitative indicators, are, as we say, of Nobel class, people who we think are the peers of people who have already won the Nobel Prize. So this year we have 3 groups that we are recognizing and honoring: Charles Kresge of Saudi Aramco, Rong Ru of the Institute for Basic Science and Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology in South Korea, and Galen Stuckey of the University of California, Santa Barbara, for the design of functional mesoporous materials. Our second group is for the development of reversible addition, fragmentation, chain transfer polymerization, also known as RAT, Graham Mode, Ezio Rizzardo, and Sang Thang, all of CSIRO. The third group recognizes the invention of the organic light-emitting diode. And so this is for Ching Tang and Stephen Van Slyke. Tang is at the University of Rochester, but also at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And Van Slyke is the Chief Technology Officer of a California company called Catiba.
Very good. Neil.
Okay, well, last year, I was on the Hangout last year, and I predicted John Goodenough for lithium-ion batteries. And as he didn't win last year, and not a lot's changed, we're still using lithium batteries. I'm still going to go with that.
Do.
So it's a bit of a cop-out, but I think Neil's got a very good pick there. So I think Goodenough has a very good chance. But I guess I should come up with one of my own as well. So I've kind of got a little bit of a gut feeling for Michael Gratzel and dye-sensitized solar cells this year.
Do you think that with all the perovskite solar cell stuff going on at the moment, that might kind of leapfrog the dye stuff, and that the Nobel Committee might be a little nervous. You know, they might wait a few years.
Or it might just bring everything a little bit to the fore and make it a little bit more in the front of their minds. You never know. But you may have a point.
Lauren, any picks from you this year?
Well, I'm going to do what Neil did and remind everybody who I picked last year, which was for single molecule spectroscopy, I think, Zer and Merner. So I'm going to go with that again. I think, I was looking at the broadcast from last year, and there was a lot of discussion of, basic science versus applied science, and this is sort of one of those things that happened a while ago. A lot of stuff that's built on it since then. So I'm gonna stick with that. They've got to win eventually, right?
We hope. We hope. And I will also repeat my pick from last year. Folks that watched last year will recall that I picked Pierre Chambon, Ronald Evans, and Elwood Jensen. And they discovered a large family of proteins, nuclear receptors, that are major mediators of hormone action. So steroids, thyroid hormone, vitamin D, all these drugs transmit their signal through similar pathways. If you've ever heard about the breast cancer drug tamoxifen, the anti-diabetes drugs Actos or Avandia, all of these drugs emerge in part because we have a better understanding of how this big family of hormone receptors works. So I'm sticking by my pick. The folks that are in this kind of category one of major sort of predictor prize called the Lasker Prize. It's 10 years ago now, 2004. So we'll see if it's here.
Jensen is sadly no longer with us, Carmen.
Boy, okay, well then that's, I'm sorry that I neglected to look into that. So I guess it would just have to be Chambon and Evans, but perhaps they might pick a third. I don't know if, has that been in the Thomson Reuters predictions, David? That category?
Well, actually in medicine, physiology or medicine in 2006, yes, we picked Chambon, Evans, and Jensen. As Sue said, he has unfortunately passed away, I think, 2011. But we had picked them back in 2006.
I'm going to interject here real quick because I saw an awesome message from Jillian Geraci. She says that her grad materials class is online watching all of us now, so we should all just wave and say hi. And I want to remind everybody that the hashtag to use is chemnobel, so ask your questions and we're going to get to it.
Yep. I'll ask one more question to the panelists, I think, before we open up the floodgates. I want to know, what's your methodology? What's your secret sauce? You're not just picking these folks out of a hat. How do you choose your laureate picks? Start with David.
Well, of course, everybody knows that we take a quantitative approach. We analyze the scientific literature using the Web of Science database. By the way, this year is the 50th anniversary of the introduction of what used to be called the Science Citation Index, developed by Eugene Garfield. And back in 1964, when that was first introduced, Garfield almost immediately began to look into the question of how often Nobel Prize winners were cited. He didn't have much data. The database had only recently been compiled. And yet he was able to find that Nobel Prize winners are cited some 30 to 50 times as much as the so-called average scientist. And over the years, he did many studies looking at the correlation between the frequency of citations, either for individual in their body of work or particular papers, and found that indeed high citation frequency is a good indicator of people who tend to be of Nobel class, belonging to this pool of peers who have accomplished a lot of significance in research according to their colleagues. So our approach is quantitative first and foremost. we look for very highly cited papers, papers cited 1,000 times or more, and they can be from any year, perhaps as long ago as the late 60s now. We have some people that are in their 80s, perhaps over 90, that are of course still eligible. We go down lists of highly cited papers, and we consider whether the research reported is the kind that the Nobel Prize Committee has historically recognized.
David, are there any striking counterexamples where someone has won the prize and has been cited very, very little? Are there any obvious cases where that's happened?
That's very rare in my experience, especially recently. I can think of the 2009 prize in physics that was for the charge-coupled devices and optical fibers, and their work was not cited as much, or it didn't come onto our radar. But I think as we move toward inventions, applications in technology, then we get a less clear signal of the impact of the fundamental research.
Wasn't Duchenne relatively lower cited than some of his Nobel laureate peers?
Offhand, I can't remember offhand.
Neil, to clarify for folks who may not be chemists in the audience, could you state the full name of the person that you're referring to?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So Pierre-Gilles Duchenne was a French soft matter physicist, and he won the prize, I think sometime in the 90s. And I remember his name sort of stands out as someone who was perhaps less cited than some other Nobel Prize winners and other physicists who didn't win. Maybe, I think it was something like maybe an H index of 50 or 60 rather than 120.
So, Neil or Stu, would you like to talk about how you went about choosing your pick? Niels, you've had yours for now a good year, so you just kind of go on your gut.
Yeah, well, I think now I've got a pick, and it's and everyone knows about it. I can't change. That wouldn't work. But I think the key criteria for me is it's kind of hard to explain, but it's the kind of work that's so well known in textbooks and so sort of established that you kind of forget that someone actually had to do the original research to begin with. Things that are so well known, so established that everyone uses them, everyone's aware of them. So for me, it's not necessarily about citations. It's about being kind of part of the science bedrock.
That's interesting. Application, applied science versus fundamental science. I mean, should Nobels always go to fundamental science, or you're talking about bedrock, or how often have they really gone to something because it had this big application?
Yeah, I think the example that David just gave of the charge-coupled devices and the optical fibers, I think they're probably not particularly they weren't a basic science one, but again they're so well established that that they've been around for a lot of our lives that you kind of forget that again these had to be invented. People had to do a lot of work to do it, and they're vastly impactful on our lives, like lithium batteries, which is that's my pick.
If you're just tuning in now, we are predicting the Chemistry Nobel Prizes for 2014. You can ask your questions with the hashtag chemnobel. Stu, care to illuminate us about your methodology before we go to the tweet stream?
Sure. So, I mean, a lot of these names just sort of in my consciousness from the blogosphere and reading the blogs. And although I'm very disappointed that Chembark, popular chemistry blogger, has not put his picks up yet, his posts in previous years are a wonderful resource for basically a long list of names of people who may well win Nobel Prizes. And also Ash at the Curious Wave function as well posts predictions every year, as do some others. But it's really the names that sort of spring to mind, and then thinking about, it's very hard to know the mind of the Nobel Committee, and it's things that, it's a question of, is it time for that? Is that the sort of thing they will go for? Because I don't think there's any pattern to these things. Last year was computational. Are we due for another biology prize? I don't know. So, to be honest, it's really just a shot in the dark. I think there's a list of, I came up with a list of about 15 candidates, and I think most of them may win, but that might be in 5 years' time or 20 years' time.
You should to the group, to the page later. We'll have to. You may not get them all.
I'll put them up there.
Great. Any questions in from the audience?
Yes. Well, I was thinking this sort of follows along with the methodology question, but this is one question about, I guess, looking at particular awards, who got certain awards for this one, and maybe that is part of the methodology. Does chemistry have a similar, for medicine, there's the Lasker Awards, and so what does is there any predictive award for chemistry?
So I was actually checking out, and one of the other people on my list is Bob Langer, because he won the Priestley Medal from the American Chemical Society in 2012. Then he won the Wolf Prize in 2013, and then the Kyoto Prize in 2014. So maybe he needs to round that out with the Nobel Prize. But I think the Wolf Prize is probably one of the better predictors in chemistry, perhaps, although that didn't really work with Sheckman when he won the Nobel Prize in chemistry, but got the Wolf Prize in physics. So it's not always a great predictor.
The discipline boundaries are blurring.
Yeah.
I had a quick look at the sort of the prize winners in the Wolf Prize and the Priestley Medal today, and I think I found 6 people who've won the Wolf and the Priestley, but not the others, and that's Alan Bard, Carl Geraci, Gabor Somogyi, Harry Gray, Dick Zare, and Bob Langer. So I don't think anyone would be surprised if any of those won, and I think a lot of people would be very happy to see them win, because those are the kind of names that we talk about a lot.
Sorry.
Yep. You're cutting in and out, Lauren. Could you try again?
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is this okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now you're a little bit better.
Okay. So this was, you just mentioned Harry Gray. This was a question from Lila. She said she's always rooting for Harry Gray, who was her grad advisor. What's your take on whether he's got a chance?
Yeah, he's got a chance. But who knows when. But yeah. He's near the top of a lot of people's lists, but it might happen, it might not.
Yeah. A couple of names I've seen bandied about the Twitter stream was, again, Carl Geraci, some mentions. This kind of comes off of one of David's picks, Krzysztof Matajewski for the ATRP, which is related to the polymerization techniques that you talked about earlier. Let's see. Oh, interesting. So ChemJobber's asking who is on the Nobel Committee this year. Do we have any ideas?
Sorry.
No, I actually opened that because I remembered talking about it last year, and it's a panel of people whose names I can't pronounce, so I'm not going to try it. There's an inorganic, biophysics, organic, molecular biology, medical chemistry, theoretical chemistry, organic, theoretical, and physical chemistry. So
if you go through to some of their web pages, some of the ones who say like physical, I'd put it in kind of the biophysical side. There definitely looks to be a bio-heavy side to me. But then, as an inorganic chemist, anything looks bio-heavy to me.
I'm really trying to avoid the should biologists win the chemistry prize topic. I think we kind of beat that, to death last year.
But I think this Here's a question. Does there seem to be a recurring multi-year cycle of major chemistry subfields recognized from year to year?
I don't think so.
I think that there's... It's kind of hard to say. I had a quick look at the last 10 years, and there doesn't seem to be a pattern, but there do seem to generally... It does look like they've covered a lot of the areas that you would think of as chemistry, you know, materials and organic and inorganic and the different things, with half of them being on the biological side. So I think it would be strange if they were absolutely nailed on one side or the other, or whichever angle. So I think they do probably try to balance it a little bit, but not perhaps in a too fixed way.
Maybe the sample size isn't big enough. Maybe we have to get a couple, more decades of prizes, and someone will crack the code.
I think in the last 10 or 15 years, though, it has gone quite a lot more bio than maybe in the previous 10 or 15 years. But maybe that just reflects the science that's being done in, I guess, molecular biology and advances there.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's another question from the interweb. We have, which chemnobel winners do you think are trying for number 2?
Sharpless. I think Barry Sharpless has got a good chance for click chemistry at some point, but maybe not yet.
Yes, I second that as well. We named Fulkin and Finn and Sharpless for click chemistry last year, 2013, as citation laureates. Their papers from the early 2000 period have received an enormous number of citations relative to their age, so it really reflects the strong impact that work has had.
Right, I have some more questions. Which was the most overhyped recent award, maybe in the last 20 years, if anyone can think of one?
That's a dangerous question.
Yeah. Well, if we're thinking about dangerous questions, I want to ask, where are the women? I want to ask who, there's only about 4 women, I think we were talking about this behind the scenes a little bit, that have won the Chemistry Nobel Prize. Who among women has been cited as a contender, and for what areas?
Well, I'll add once again that we selected Jacqueline Barton in 2009 as a possible choice for work on electron transfer in DNA, along with Bernd Geiste and Gary Schuster. So we have named one citation laureate in chemistry who is a woman.
I guess maybe in a sort of a nanotubes kind of thing, would Millie Drexel be someone? I think that's someone who often crops up in this kind of thing.
I wonder if tubes have missed the boat.
Well, yeah, maybe.
All I'll say on that front is that I saw her speak last year, and I had a major girl crush, so I would love to see that.
Hashtag major girl crush.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so we've asked some of these questions. What do the Chem Nobel panelists think about prizes for specific discoveries versus lifetime achievement? So specifically talking about Langer or Chang, people like that.
I think that's where the Priestley Medal should be more widely celebrated. So that's an award given once a year by the American Chemical Society, and that kind of often is to more of a body of work than the Nobel Prize to a specific discovery. So I think perhaps the Nobel Prize can go for the discovery option, and the Priestley can go for a kind of a lifetime's work, and that we should, not expect them to try and do the same thing, but celebrate the chemists who win both and use them as a way to give a good cheer for chemistry.
I think some of the Nobel Prizes, though, I mean, it's meant to be for the most significant discovery in the previous 12 months, according to the original will, which is never really the way it's happened, which the way science works is it can't really. But I think some of the prizes have been more for lifetime achievement awards. I mean, the one that's close to my heart is the Supramolecular Prize from '87. It went to Jean-Marie Lane, Donald Cram, and Charles Pedersen. And that was essentially just for developments in host-guest chemistry. There wasn't one specific major discovery there. So I think some of the award time achievements.
I think E.J. Corey's one might have been the last one that was sort of more obviously like that, and that was quite a long time ago.
In, organic synthesis, that kind of thing, yeah.
You could argue last year's was somewhat lifetime achievement as well. Last year's chemistry award for computational chemistry.
So with timeliness topic, there's someone asking, is it too early for Omar Yagi to win? I would assume for MOPS.
Metal organic frameworks.
Yes.
Maybe. He's on my list. I think he will win at some point for MOFs with probably 2 other people. The question is who those 2 other people would be, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, one of David's picks is mesoporous materials, more the inorganic side than metal organic frameworks. But I really would not be surprised if metal organic frameworks did get the prize maybe in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I think the zeolites and other mesoporous materials, I mean, those are, like everyone says, every molecule of petrol and gasoline has gone through the pores of zeolite A, and that's a huge achievement. And zeolites haven't won a Nobel Prize, and MOFs are still very much in the lab. I don't know if they're going any further yet. So I think that's a long way away for me. That could be the computational chemistry isn't going to win moment from me. You heard it here first. They'll probably win now.
Well, that's true. We have picked researchers in MOFs. We picked Kitagawa as well as Yagi. Other people have mentioned Richard Robson at the University of Melbourne as a key early discoverer too. But concerning the impact that the science has had, I do see a prize for mesoporous materials before MOFs, I believe.
They still gave a prize for C60 though, didn't they?
But that was a whole new allotrope of carbon.
Whoa.
That was pretty cool.
All right, let's go to another question. Which journal claims to have the most influence over the Nobel Prize, or does one, or is there one, I guess, could be any of the above.
Over to you, Stu.
I imagine that the Nobel Committee pay no attention to the journals in which any of the work is published. And if they do, they're crazy. It's about the work, it's not about where it's published.
Can we quote you on that?
Yes, you can. You can.
There's no catchy hashtag, but it'll end up on the tweet stream, I guarantee you that. How are we doing on questions, Lauren? Do we still have them coming in steady? We're coming up on 4 o'clock.
I think they're dying down a little bit. And still wants us to go back to the hyped question, if you want to touch that one.
Why don't we take like?
Stuart just slightly answered the hype question, didn't he? When he dismissed C60 out of hand.
Yeah, I think so.
I think there's nothing wrong with C60 being given a prize. I think it's a shame that Huffman and Kretschmer, who actually made it in quantities you could see, didn't get a share in some kind of prize. But
yeah. So let's take one last question.
Yeah, I think that one, this may not be a direct question, and someone said something about if it was about citations, Whitesides should have won by now, and then Paul Bracker made a funny comment about Whiteside's winning for his bubble wrap, which, you know, there was a news story recently about how they were using bubble wrap for containers. I actually wrote the story. It was a cool story, probably not Nobel Prize worthy, but I guess that we could put a question together from this: is will he win, and if so, when?
I think the thing with Whitesides is, like a lot of very obviously, you know, those incredibly high-level chemists, is that they've achieved a lot in a lot of different areas, and it's hard to say, well, which one field would you award it for? And I think that's what a lot of people say about Whitesides. He's obviously done an incredible amount of work in an incredible range of places. So who would choose which one you'd give it for? Apart from bubble wrap.
Has Whitesides won an Ig Nobel Prize?
What was that, Carmen?
Has Whitesides won an Ig Nobel Prize?
Maybe next year.
We'll have to see if the Ig Nobel Prizes are predictors.
Shot at answering the question about who you would pick according to citations, and it was mentioned before, Michael Drexel really stands out in terms of the total number of citations to particular papers and per year. The researchers who we have chosen for mesoporous materials, some of their papers also stand out. The original paper by Kresge and Jeff Beck. Unfortunately, Beck died in 2012, why we cannot name a citation laureate for those two 1992 papers, very highly cited. After which comes Tang and Van Slyke, Olivisatos, Sharpless just behind. So some of the names that we have been already talking about are the ones that rise to the top in terms of total number of citations to extremely highly cited papers.
All right, I actually have one last question, and I feel I have to ask this one since it's from our editor-in-chief. Who didn't win a Nobel Prize who should have?
Geraci, although hopefully he still might.
Yeah, I mean, that's the elephant in the room sometimes, isn't it? I mean, how have him and whoever else was involved, how have they not won one? I mean, if you're thinking about societal impact, that's got to be number one.
I guess
I don't have
that should be. Sorry, I guess that should be pointed out. That's for the birth control pill for the general members of the audience here.
Yep, talk about a prize for women.
Yeah.
I don't have a name in chemistry, but I do have one in physiology or medicine, and that's Jacques Miller of Walter and Eliza Hall Institute, who discovered in the early 60s the function of the thymus, and who also was able to differentiate in the later 60s T and B cells, and I think it's unthinkable that he has not already won a Nobel Prize.
The other one that was mentioned last year as well is Gabor Sommerjai missed out when Ertl won the prize for surface chemistry. That was quite a shock because I think they actually shared, I think it was the Wolf Prize.
Yes.
I know Rudy's got strong feelings about that one, hasn't he? I read his editorial.
Yeah. I think on that note, let's wrap up. I want to thank everyone who tuned in today. Your questions really made this lively. I want to thank Lila Guterman for looking at all of those tweets and helping us sort through the questions. My co-host Lauren Wolf for doing the same. Thanks to the guests, David Pendlebury, Neil Withers, Sue Cantrill. Thank you all very much. Before you go, I want to remind all of you that this is only the first of 3 Nobel Google Hangouts. The links to the physics and physiology hangout are in the box that is below this stream. You can find out more at the hashtags BizNobel and MedNobel. And those hangouts are both going to be taking place on Thursday, October 2nd. So thank you all very much for joining us. And with that, we will sign off.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.